Margin is the space between what we're capable of doing at full throttle with all our adrenaline running and what we're actually doing. Margin is the space in between. And the problem is that too many of us run with too little margin. We don't have enough margin. Okay? Our margin isn't big enough. We are running too close to 100% all the time. This term was coined by a man named Richard Swenson, but I really learned about it in the fire department, where I needed to run at less than 100% most of the time, far less, because there were times when my utmost was needed, and I needed to have a lot of energy in reserve in order to respond to some especially critical emergency. So the way I divided it in my own mind was that I was going to put out about 70% of my capability all the time, so that when an extraordinary demand was placed upon me, I would be able to put out the 100% of what I was capable of. Now, some people would call this sandbagging, and there's a cultural stigma against putting out less than we're capable of. We're supposed to be giving 120% all the time to everything that we do. But the problem is when we live like that, and something extraordinary comes along, we don't have the reserves to deal with it. The recent financial crisis, the recession, is an excellent example of how running with too little margin can get us in trouble. So there were a lot of people living beyond their means, not saving enough money, spending more than they had, living on credit, living on borrowed money, and as a result, many people suffered a lot of hardship because of this overextension, because of living too close with not enough margin, too close to 100%. So how about living with some margin in our relationships? Instead of living with our accounts just barely settled with our spouse or with our significant other, what if we had more leeway there? What if there was plenty of room for disagreements and conflicts which always come up, and we didn't have to worry about breaking the bank when it came to our emotional expense accounts? What if we increased the margin in our stress lives? Instead of running at almost maximum stress all the time, what if we dialed it back a few notches, gave ourselves some leeway, increased our margin? How would that help us when truly extraordinary crises came into our lives? What if we increased our spiritual margins as well? Instead of just barely feeding our souls enough to stay alive, instead of just barely reading enough of the Bible to stay sane, instead of praying just enough to feel good about ourselves, what if we increased that margin? What if we gave ourselves plenty of margin there? Christ was an excellent example of this. We see it in his time spent in the back of the boat, sleeping after a day of preaching. We see it in his escapes to the wilderness to pray. Jesus Christ could have run himself ragged, doing good works for other people while he was here on earth. But he didn't. He lived with margin, enough margin that he could concentrate on the things that really mattered. First and foremost, his relationship with the Father. What will it look like when you're living with a good margin in your life?